let's go ahead and dive in then.
Sounds great. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Kathleen Glynn Sparrow of the College Coaches, and you just heard a bit from Brock Jolly from the College Funding Coach. You'll meet us all in just a moment when we introduce ourselves. Tonight, you're in for a treat. We're going to cover a few things about what has changed in the college process. I think you'll notice just a few things have. We'll talk about how to begin the process and when and why. It was just as importantly, talk about the importance of fit and how to find the right fit in a college. And then we'll kind of shift over into the money matters, where Brock will talk about when you should start talking as a family about paying for college, demystifying what an EFC or an expected family contribution is, and he will alert you to some changes that are coming for the free application for student aid. All right, so next slide, please. So that's me. My college buddies say that picture makes me look like Macy's Employee of the Month. So I try to jazz it up for you people tonight. Okay, I put a little bling on to make me look a little more hip. I've been in college counseling and education teaching for 25 years, mostly in the DC area. My own college journey started at Duke University, where I majored in English and French, and then I went on to Emory and got a master's in education with a specialty in teaching English. I have 2 kids, and they taught me more about the process than I ever learned working with hundreds of families because of the emotions involved, their emotions and my emotions. We all had the same goal, a happy choice in the end, but we all, of course, had different ways of getting there. But they both lived to survive living with a college counselor. Maddie graduated from Duke and is teaching high school English in Raleigh. And Aiden is studying abroad in London right now. He's at University of Miami and studying theater arts in London. All right, thanks.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Becky Balby and I'm one of the head coaches with the College Coaches. I recently retired as a college access counselor from Lower Merion High School, which is a large public high school located outside of Philadelphia and the home of Kobe Bryant. I spent 11 years there, and prior to that time, I spent 30 years in college admissions at 4 different types of institutions in and around the Philadelphia area. Excuse me. I graduated from Wagner College, which is a liberal arts school in New York, with a degree in, sociology and religion. And I have a master's in higher educational counseling and secondary certification from Westchester University, which is one of the state universities in Pennsylvania.
Thanks. Perfect. Thanks, Becky. And my name is Brock Jolly, and I know very little about college counseling, but the way I always tie this together is that if Kathleen and Becky do their job and help your kids get their clients get into these great schools, the problem is that oftentimes parents come to them and say, well, hey, Kathleen, Becky, this is fantastic, but how in the world am I going to pay for XYZ school, right? Fill in the blanks. And that's really what got me into this field. Is I started in the industry around 2000. As some of you may recall, that was just about the time of the .com bubble bursting. And I just had so many parents at that time who said, Brock, how are we going to pay for our kids' college education? And my honest answer early on was, I didn't know either. And I also figured out that most financial advisors really had no clue how college funding really worked. And if you fast forward to today, because Section 529 plans didn't really exist back then, or they weren't as prevalent as they are today. But even today, the answer by probably 97% of financial advisors is, okay, if you want to pay for college, you go fund a Section 529 plan. And I would say, you got to understand though, a Section 529 plan is a great tool. It's not necessarily a great strategy. And so just understanding that and being able to integrate both the planning side of things in terms of finding the right school, finding the right fit, casting a broad net to determine what type of school is the best possible option or options for your child, and then maybe reverse engineering, or ideally forward engineering, to figure out how are you going to pay for that school, and here's what's really important, and still retire one day. If we were standing in an auditorium, I'd ask the question this way: how many of you have a goal of one day being able to retire? My guess is most hands are probably going up, right? And if that's the goal, how do you do it and still pay for your kids' college education? Because for many of you, that might be sort of that last real big hurdle before retirement. So we're going to talk, Kathleen and Becky are going to go into some of their advice and thoughts and some of the ever changing world of sort of the admissions and planning side of things. And then we'll talk about the paying side. And it's really, you've got to do both simultaneously, I think, to have a successful journey down this path. And I'd be remiss if we didn't just also quickly introduce the other two folks. At the bottom of my screen is Bernadette Boyle, who is part of the College Funding Coach team. She'll be behind the scenes a little bit. And I just draw your attention, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat section. And just, I see some folks have already put some things in there. Just to really clarify, try to use the chat rather than the Q&A, just so that we can keep it all in one place and other people can see it. And Bernie will be there to help answer that. And then secondly, George Sparrow. You might notice a similar last name, but Kathleen, why don't I just let you introduce the guy who is below you on my screen?
I love it. The guy who's below me. I love this. He did ask to be employee of the month. And I told him, A, we don't do that. And B, he's never going to get employee of the month because we're married. Just kidding.
Oh, and by the way, I'm on the screen above you on my screen where I belong. So.
Oh yeah, nice.
And I would just say something quickly that we will be holding a Q&A kind of after the college coaches portion, and then we'll hold a Q&A at the end as well. So if you have some questions that you want to hold till then, and you're welcome to put them in the chat, and we'll be answering most of those kind of live, kind of midway through, and then we'll do another set towards the end.
And I just noticed too, somebody just asked, will the recording be available? It will be available. It'll be on our website. Kathleen, I'm guessing you'll probably make it available on your website as well. So we'll clean it up and make it look pretty, and then it will be available on the website. I'll talk a little bit more about how to access that as we go through our piece, but we absolutely will make it available along with the slides as well. So.
Absolutely. All right, thanks. So I'm going to kick it off here with a few ways to kind of approach the process in order to decrease the stress level in your house, because I don't know anybody who wants to increase the stress level in your house. How many times have you said to your student, well, when I was your age, and when they respond, how do they respond? They either put in their earphones, hit go, play on Netflix, walk out the door. So that technique is not effective. I know that. I still say it to my kids. This is a judgment-free zone. But a lot has changed since you applied to college, if you applied to college around 30 years ago, which is like me. So it's really important to come at this with not a, you know how it all works because you've been through it, but rather be open to learning about the nuances that are out there now. And also, most importantly, just to be a support to your student, because that's really what they need. Next slide. So what has changed over the past 30 some years, or even in the past 3 years, right? Students apply to more schools, 8 to 12. When I applied, we applied to 3 or 4 schools. We didn't categorize them, as likely, target, and reach. We all kind of made fun of our college counselor, who is some lady in a basement somewhere. Nobody makes fun of me, okay? And I'm not in a basement, or as far as you know, because I have a fake background on. Anyway, so 8 to 12 schools. There's something called demonstrated interest now, which wasn't around back in the day. That is where some colleges, typically not big state schools, but smaller, medium-sized liberal arts schools, will try to gauge how interested are you in the college. We won't go too deep into the weeds here about why they care about that. It has to do with yield. You can Google it later, but they actually keep track of, have you visited or done a virtual visit? Have you attended a college rep visit in the area, a college fair? Have you opened their emails? Very big brothery. So something new and annoying. Selectivity has changed. colleges that you might have thought, okay, I think my kid's definitely going to get in. For example, University of Maryland used to be a fairly approachable college. Now, last year, the acceptance rate was about 42%, which is vastly different than years ago. Northeastern University in Boston used to be just kind of a nice Boston school. Last year's acceptance rate, 7% early action. So I tell you that, and sorry, I'm using terms like early action. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole on that, but just 7% is just to keep in mind. I tell you that not to stress you out and not to have you translate this in your head like my kid's never going to get in anywhere. It's more to just say things have changed and keep an open mind and stay informed. But I can guarantee you still will annoy your kids during the process. Next slide. So here's a mistake that I see parents making, starting too early, 9th grade, like, here we go, right out of the gates, let's do this. Think about what you were like at 14 as a 9th grader. My priorities at 14, what color lip gloss was I going to wear that day? Should I wear my hair in an edgy side ponytail or more like athletic back ponytail? Okay, I was no way thinking about my future. And at 9th grade, they're 14. They should be focusing on finding their locker, forgetting their combination, getting a new combination, finding their locker again, finding friends, extracurriculars. It's about the journey. High school is not just about the destination of college. Of course, you're going to make strategic decisions along the way with your student, but you're not going to just catapult them into the process. Next slide.
The one thing I told Kathleen, I said, but this doesn't mean that you shouldn't be thinking about how you, mom and dad, might want to be paying for college, right? And so don't confuse the two, right? Because it's never too early to start paying for it. Because good news is, hopefully, you don't have to find your locker or remember the combination or those type of things. So more on that to come.
Exactly. And Brock, I don't know if you remember the Oprah Winfrey episode where she goes, you get a car, you get a car. I was thinking that tonight it might be kind of fun if you say you'll pay for that family's tuition and that family's tuition. Just a thought. This is being recorded, so whatever you say, we're going to hold you to.
Can and will be used against me, huh?
Exactly.
We'll come back on that.
All right, get back to that. Another thing I see people do, which causes stress in the process, is they panic about the PSAT. The PSAT stands for preliminary. I think of it as practice. Some schools offer it in 10th grade. Some offer it in 11th grade. It is meant to just have your student practice sitting in a chair, bubbling in things. I cannot tell you how sad it is when I see a parent talk to me and the student is there and they say, well, they did really poorly on the PSAT. This was their score. And I don't know how they're going to get in anywhere. That is giving up on your student before the student has even finished high school or started the process. So think of P as practice. Colleges do not see these scores, and a low score has no indication on how the student will do in the college process. And by the way, over 70% of the colleges now are test optional. Next slide. Here's a mistake that I made in my house, which I'm sure George would agree, I rarely make any mistakes. So just one mistake. When my kids were going through the process, I would pepper them with college talk all the time. I would ruin every car ride, every dog walk, every dinner with college, which was not an effective way of preserving our relationship. So what we did is we limited college talk in our house to Sundays at 2 p.m. What that did was I kept myself from peppering them with questions. I still wrote down all the questions that I was going to ask them on Sunday, and it kept my kids accountable. At 5 of 2, you could hear the pitter pat of feet running upstairs to go get ready for the meeting. They were sending emails to the teachers because they knew I was going to say, did you email your teachers to say you're going to miss school on Friday to go visit a college? Anyway, try it in your house. You don't have to start that now, but junior and senior year is a good idea. Another thing to avoid some stress is let your student be the driving force and the voice in the essay. I often see parents over edit the essay, and the colleges can see that. They know what words students use and don't use. Of course, you want you to look over the essay, or another adult or teacher, college counselor to look over it, but not to write it for the student. The essay is supposed to be the face of the application, something the student wants to convey that's important to them or about their life, okay? And you don't want to just repeat things. If the student is a star soccer player, you don't really want to write about soccer. They know you play soccer from your application. What makes you you? Some topics to avoid. I think this is a building slide. Yep. The big sports win. Oh, we were down by da 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 da. Becky's Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, by the way. She's pretty psyched about that. You shouldn't write about the 1-week community service program, which opened your eyes. And these are not my opinion. This is what college reps tell us. Please tell your students not to write on this. Also, no torn ACLs. They feel sorry for your injury, but they don't want to read about it. And then being smart about, don't write about politics. A little too risky. You don't know who's reading your application. All right, next slide. A little bit more advice. Students should write what they want to say, and also guess what they want to say, not what you want them to say. Case in point, my essay, my college essay was on the Big Mac. Do you think my parents were happy with me? Not at all. Okay, it was on the Big Mac. It was wacky, it was creative, and a little bit off, just like yours truly. So it really was the face of me. And I got into a fine college, so all good. The essay too shouldn't be built up to the end all be all. It's only 650 words. It's about a page. Your students have been preparing to write this essay their whole life organically through all the papers they're writing in English and history and etc. So they'll be ready. Humor is great. I always tell my students, how do you know if you're funny? If somebody else has told you you're funny. If you think you're funny and no one said you're funny, you're not funny. Okay. Couple other tips here that we don't need to go too far down the rabbit hole because I want to stay on time. All right, next slide, please. So when to begin and how, this is really important. If you steamroll your team at the start of the process, they'll shut down and respond with fine, whatever, I don't know. Those are the best. Whoever invented those words, thank you very much. Their stress will increase and so will yours. So instead, you see, when is your student emotionally available? If you said, hey, I'd like to talk about college this weekend, and the student's head is about to pop off and they say, well, I have piano practice. I want to go to Sally's house to play blah, blah, blah. I have a paper due. That's not the right time to introduce the process. See when they're emotionally available. And if they're not very kind of geared towards college at that point, be open to other options, gap year, apprenticeships, community college, doesn't have to be a 4-year college, all those kind of good things. All right, thanks. Next slide.
So there could be some differences in how you as a parent make a decision about the college process and how your student does. For example, like Brock was talking about, never too early to start saving and wondering how you're going to pay for college. Some of you may be thinking about the prestige or the name of the school. Validating your 18 years of parenting and a major, is that going to lead to a job, or is your student going to come home after 4 years of college and live in your basement, provided you have a basement? I don't want that. So you want to see what the major is and what the job opportunities might look like. So, which leads to what kind of career advising and networking is there on the campus. You want them to have fun, but not too much fun. And of course, you want to keep them close to home. Your student, on the other hand, is thinking, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to be free. I'm going to have the greatest roommate ever. I want to be in a cool location, go to all the concerts and sporting events. Maybe they'll buy sporting goods to go to the sporting events, have great food and be far from home. Well, maybe they don't want to be too far from home. Next slide. Parenting hack. Just kidding. There are no hacks. Everything is hard. Kids do not listen. This is your life now, and Godspeed. Next slide. So, of course, there are a number of factors to consider in the college search. Academic offering. So what kind of majors does the college offer? How big is the school and how big are the class sizes? The students, since I live in Pennsylvania, Penn State, does a student want to go to a place like Penn State, which has 40,000 students, and their intro to psych class might have 500 in it? Or do they want something a little bit smaller? As a parent too, you want to take a look at the retention rates and the graduation rates, because again, you want your student to go there and graduate, not be there forever. It's not a full-time job forever. And then they can go off and get a job, hopefully, and not live in your basement. You want to look at the academic support offerings that colleges offer. A lot of schools have writing centers and math centers. And if you have a student who has a learning difference, you want to make sure that that student's going to be supported in the way that they have been during high school so that they're successful in college. In terms of student life, what kinds of clubs and organizations and sports does the college have to offer? And in terms of location, where are they? Is it an urban location, suburban, rural? What's a good fit for your student? And again, going back to those career and internship opportunities, or do they have a co-op program? Kathleen mentioned Northeastern, which is a big co-op school. And the difference between an internship and a co-op simply is that many co-op experiences are paid opportunities. You want to venture out into the surrounding community. What does that look like? And is that area something that you like? Next slide, please. And why is a good fit, finding that good fit, critical? So if your student makes a choice and it turns out to be maybe not the best choice, then many times what they're going to do is transfer after a year. And while that's not necessarily terrible, during that time, it can be tumultuous for the student and they can be unhappy, unproductive, and you've invested time and money with little or no return. And as Brock was talking about a little bit earlier too, it really is important to discuss the tuition limits. It's very important to really check out if you can afford a school and discuss it with your student. It's very hard on a student who applies to XYZ school and then finds out that they would love to go, but they cannot afford to go. That happened while I was a counselor at Lower Merion, and a student came in on May 1st, which is the date that students are supposed to deposit at their college of their choice. And she had been accepted to NYU and really wanted to go. And her parents never had that conversation with her about affordability and told her that day that she couldn't go. So that was one of those pick up the pieces kind of meetings with a student. And the thing that's also important to know is that where you go to school is not who you're going to be. I mean, it's not, no, where you go to school is not, that is who you are going to be. But I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's not who you will be in terms of, it's not all about the name. It's about the fit. The student success really depends more on the fit than the name or the prestige of a particular institution. Next slide, please. So how do you find a good fit? Well, following the advice of your college counselor, don't compare yourself to others. Realizing fit is more than just numbers and rankings. Honestly, if I could do away with those rankings, I would. So we don't want to put a lot of stock in those. Thinking that your mom's manicurist sister's cousin knows what's best for you and is an expert on college admissions, that's doubtful, even though you've never met and they're an accountant. No, that would be all about numbers if you're an accountant. So what's a good way to find a fit? Starting early, not too early, like Kathleen said, not ninth grade, but maybe a sophomore year, you start casually, start locally, going to visit a couple of schools. You want to visit a variety of different types of schools, a large public, a small private, a school that might be in an urban location or a suburban location. What kinds of admit rates do they have? Taking a look at what the social media is about the college is a good thing to do, and check out to see if they have an online newspaper or talk to current students who attend this school. Reading the Fisk Guide to Colleges can be a really helpful experience as well. And parents, remember, these 4 years are for the student. They're not for you.
Kathleen,
Oh, I thought you wanted this one.
no, I'm not going to take this one from you.
All
I just like to
right.
surprise you.
Look how well we get along after how many years? Anyway, why we might be helpful to you. Attending college is a big decision, and it's a big financial decision. You wouldn't buy a car by just jumping in the first one you see, or buy a house by knocking on someone's door and say, this looks pretty good. Can I live here? College is a huge investment. Some colleges, depending on where you go, can cost more than a car or than a house. So sometimes it's good to get advice from someone who has no life, and everyone on our team has no life, because we just spend all our time keeping current with the college comings and goings. Having a college coach too can help make sure the students' writing is clear and compelling. Always their own writing. Integrity of voice is important to us. Everybody on our team is a lifelong educator. No one's doing this as a hobby or as an add-on. We can help make sure your list is balanced. The horror stories that you hear of so-and-so had this awesome GPA and this awesome test score and didn't get in anywhere, that's because their list was not balanced. They probably applied to a whole bunch of reach schools and didn't have a balance. If you're in, whether you're in a public school or a private school, you're undoubtedly getting an outstanding education. The fact of the matter is, though, at some schools, the counselor has hundreds of students to work with. So if your student would benefit from some personal attention or a little extra attention, a coach might be helpful. We also, going back to that theme of no life, we are available summer, weekends, evenings, and even holiday breaks. All right. Next slide, please.
Well, I tried to have a life, so I'll make my portion short here. I just have a couple of slides kind of talking a little bit about our current offerings. At the College Coaches, we're very proud of the fact that we're extremely transparent with all of our pricing and how we engage with our clients. We put out what we call bundles rather than kind of big packages, right? So a package is, hey, come to us, and for $15, $20, $30, $40,000, some insane amount of money, we'll just do everything for you and kind of, make some false promises like, hey, we know the admissions director at here or there, right? So that's not our game. One of the things that we have that's most impressive that people tend to really gravitate towards is really our college coaching services, right? So we call it the season pass, where this is for juniors, and it basically sets up a series of 7 meetings, talks about the college list, and we help you build that college list. We explain why we put those colleges on that list for you. So, Kathleen talked about the importance of that. That's absolutely hugely important to the overall process. And then we kind of go through application strategy, right? What all these terms mean? How are these schools going to look at you? What's the best way for you to be unique and be able to have a better chance of getting into these institutions? And of course, we talk a lot about a free introductory call, and we would certainly recommend that as a first step. Next slide, Brock.
Sorry.
So this slide basically talks about the resources included in the season pass, which again we recommend to juniors. And by the way, this isn't something we say, hey, buy this year, and this year, right? It's kind of a junior. We have a sophomore kind of get your head in the game, which is a less expensive, shorter bundle. And this is for juniors, but we take you all the way through the process, right? So we take you through senior year and the application process from a strategic point of view. So we have a playbook, again, kind of brings together all of our IP summer activities. So you can kind of sort those by activity type. We go through your timeline and make sure that you're on track. And of course, we encourage you to meet a coach first. Our kind of get in the game season pass is $3,500. And we offer $200 off for people who sign up early in the season, which we would consider the end of February. And then the next slide is my last one. Again, we also have a separate bundle for the essay service. So the common application essay is at 650 word piece there. And we take you through from brainstorming, working out the right topics, seeing what's going to work for you, collaborating on building that essay that is going to make a lot of sense for you to be kind of that game-winning essay. And that's it. And I'll put some stuff in the chat, how to get in touch with us. As Kathleen mentioned, you know, what people love about us, we have tons of great 5-star Google reviews. In fact, all 22 of our reviews are 5-star reviews. Our coaches all have a background in education, 15 to 45 years of experience. So if you have a college counselor that has 5 years of experience and kind of knows the basics, it might be worth investing to give your student an advantage with a coach. And that's it. Over to you. Oh, that's right. I think we're going to do a quick Q&A break. If people want to put some questions into the chat, we'd be happy to answer them for you right now, and we'll just give it a minute, and then we'll move forward. Play the Jeopardy theme.
I was going to say we could figure out, you know, to Kathleen's point, we could figure out who is funny and who just thinks they're funny. We could try some jokes while we're waiting for questions.
I know I'm funny, but I don't want to show you guys all that because I'm just
Right, same. I don't want to show off.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we, I'll go ahead and dive in so we can make sure we can be timely. If people do have questions, and I see one here. So I'll read it here. And George, if you want to answer it, or anybody.
Yeah, sure.
You have to purchase a bundle, or can you pick and choose services at that hourly rate?
Sure. So there's for our college coaching or our advisory services, we offer that only as a bundle. And the reason that we do that is we find that clients are much more successful when we have that kind of 7 meetings plus a college list. So we have that kind of cadence over that 12 to 14 month time period that you're with us as a junior. We do work with people hourly on all of the other services. So essay work is very hard to predict, and we can work with you hourly on that. And then we do have just the one bundle for the Common App essay. And we also have summer classes as well. And I'll put some of that in the chat. I've got some links that people can check out. But I think we go and we'll take more questions at the end.
Yeah, and so we've got another Q&A at the end, but also feel free to go ahead and keep putting them in the chat. Kathleen and George and Becky will now be on the sidelines, and I'll try to jump onto the field here and do my piece. So I'm sure they can get some questions answered. But also just a reminder, Bernie from my team is behind the scenes. So please feel free to fire away. Any questions, anything that maybe we haven't covered already, and we'll hopefully have some time at the end and be able to get those addressed. So let's talk about the paying for it side of things. And I think, you know, not to, you know, the stuff that Kathleen and Becky and George do, in some ways, that's the aspirational, exciting, the fun part. Now I get it can be a little bit stressful as well, but the super stressful part is often the paying for it part. And that's, you know, okay, your kid got into a great school. How do you pay for it? I mean, even when we talk about in-state public schools, and we've talked about University of Maryland, Penn State, I'll throw in my alma mater, University of Virginia, but you know, so many of these great state schools are also really, really expensive, right? And many of you have more than one child. And sometimes children take more than 4 years to graduate from college. So add that all up, and not to, you know, maybe pour salt on an open wound here, but this stuff is expensive. And so, you know, their tagline is, this is one game that you have to win. I think I got that pretty close to being right. And it's sort of, I would just say this part of it, the financial planning side of things, is something that it's real easy to make mistakes. And there's a lot of parents who enter into this process without knowing a whole lot about it. And it is very, very easy to make some big mistakes. And so trying to figure that all out, trying to figure out a good strategy, understanding the process, and there's a lot of moving parts. And so we'll dive into this a little bit. And I would say too, I know for the most part, we've got a lot of parents here who are parents of high school students. And it's interesting, I mentioned while sort of giving my my introduction, I started this program back in 2000, and I kind of fell into it. I would love to say it was by design. It was not. It was more by default. We were trying to help people solve a problem. And we started teaching a class through the adult education program in one of the counties surrounding Washington, D.C. And the feedback that I frequently received was, you know, hey, great information, I wish I had known this when my kids were in elementary school. And so you ought to go teach these classes at the elementary schools. And so we did that. And those parents would say, hey, Brock, great information, but I've got a fourth grader. I've got plenty of time. I'd say, well, go talk to your neighbor about whether or not it's too early for you to start planning. I think the ideal would be that, if we set up a table in the lobby of the delivery room at most major hospitals in this country, maybe we'd start getting some traction. But the problem is, for so many families, if you think about sort of your own timeline, my guess is that for many of you, you probably started your first job and some wise old soul said, hey, put some money into the retirement plan. You'll thank me later. And so you did that. And then if you follow sort of the stereotypical timeline, maybe you got married, you had kids, you moved to the suburbs, you kept putting money into your retirement plan, you bought a Honda Odyssey, and then all of a sudden it's time for the kids to go to college. And if you're like a lot of parents that my team and I deal with, it's like, holy cow, I'm a deer in headlights. College is expensive. So I just say that to sort of lay the framework to say it is expensive, but like the title of tonight's program, don't let it stress you out, because there are lots and lots of ways to pay for college. In fact, if I walked about 8 feet over here on my bookshelf, there's a book that's called 1,001 Ways to Pay for College. There are a lot of ways to pay for college. The earlier you start, the more of those 1,001 ways you have available to you. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. What I would also encourage you to is join us for a workshop, right? This is a really condensed version of some highlights from our normal workshop entitled Little Known Secrets of Paying for College. So we do probably 400 or 500 of these workshops a year around the country. So wherever you are, and by the way, I guess one of the silver linings of COVID is that we do a lot of these workshops now virtually. So you can jump on many of those. A lot of them are private. Most of them are not, right? So if you'd like to find one of those workshops, you can register for it. If we do a lot of live workshops, so please feel free. If we haven't been to your school, we'd love to have one of our team members come to your school. And we also do hybrid presentations, right? So if you, maybe people would want to come in and do a live presentation, and then also there might be a portion of the school population that would also be at home. So whatever works for you, we'd love to figure out a way to bring more of this information, certainly a deeper dive. I would tell you, if you're a parent of a sophomore, junior, or senior, a lot of this stuff is especially critical as you're going through the process. So to find those workshops, you can visit our website. Pretty simple, www.thecollegefundingcoach.org. So don't forget the, and it's .org, not .com. So take a look at it and try to find one of those workshops. I'd say this, they grow up really quickly. I mean, how many of you in the last 3, 4, 5 years have said to a friend, man, it feels like just yesterday that they were in kindergarten? And the challenge is that for so many families, they're really torn between saving for college or saving for retirement. And if you think about it, maybe for our parents, it was fairly easy to say, okay, like this is our college fund, this is our retirement fund, this is the new home fund, this is the vacation fund. And sort of to Kathleen and Becky's point, because the entire process has gotten much more complicated, and certainly over the last 20, 30, or 40 years, college has gotten a lot more expensive. It's made everything much more complicated, right? And so for the same reason that perhaps you could do your own taxes, many people hire a CPA. It's the same reason that people hire a college coach or a college funding coach, right? Because we've done this hundreds or thousands of times and can really help you navigate the process. So I would just encourage you, regardless of the age of your child, check out our website, take a look at, one of our lengthier presentations. If you'd like to come visit, that'd be great. We'd love to have you. There's also a ton of free resources. I'll talk about some of those resources towards the end of our presentation as well. a few things to keep in mind, really the three most important things to parents. And I don't know, maybe these are not exactly the three most important things, but certainly three things that are important. Number one is your health. Number two is your wealth. And number three, maybe not in that order, is your kids. And so if you think about this, all of this is really interrelated. You know, if you think about some of the things that Kathleen and Becky were discussing, we all want our kids to go to great schools. We want to launch our kids off into the world. We want to give them maybe a little bit better future than we had at their age. We also kind of want to make sure that they don't live in our basement for the rest of their lives, right? And so how do you do all that? And how do you balance this desire to have a great retirement, right? All the stuff that you can't necessarily do today because maybe you've got a job, the vacations that you've put off and these type of things. How do you do that? And oh, by the way, just let's talk demographics a little bit. People are living a lot longer. So here's the problem. People are saving less, retiring earlier, living longer, and spending more in retirement. Folks, that's a math problem, right? Layer on top of that how expensive college has gotten over the years, it turns into a real big planning challenge. And so I truly am not saying all this to like create more stress to the process, but just understanding that it's really, really important that you get it right. And we all want to help you do that. That's the purpose of this evening's conversation. So, and parents hear a lot of interesting things, right? And that's sort of how this glorious piece of artwork here from the College Funding Coach, kids always think money grows on trees, right? It's called the mom and dad tree, right? And they really don't understand it. I think, one thing I would say is the more you can do to help educate your kids about financial literacy, the better off they're going to be. I've got a good friend, his name's Tom Henske. I did a webinar with Tom a few months ago. He just recently wrote a book called Total Sense, CENTS, as in it makes total sense. And it's all about teaching your kids financial literacy. It's like $15 on Amazon. It's got a great website, just a quick little pitch for it. But the point is, think about this. Your kids in a few short years are going to go off to college. And many of you probably remember all of the credit card offers that you got, right? Sign up for this credit card because you get a free t-shirt, right? And just the impact of these things. And I would just really encourage you, sort of a short little rabbit hole conversation, but really try to educate your kids on how money works and some of the important adult decisions that they'll have to make in a number of years. It'll pay good dividends for all of you down the line, and just understanding the value of a dollar, hard work. And I think that has changed dramatically for a whole host of reasons, some good, some bad, but just understanding all of that. Why this is important, and Kathleen touched on this a little bit too, right? It's like, you don't want these conversations to feel like you're nagging them, right? But how do you have meaningful, important conversations to, and Kathleen and Becky have probably experienced this more than I, but you hear kids like, why do you choose the college that you choose? Well, it's where my boyfriend went to school. My girlfriend went to school. It's close to home. It's far away from home. They've got an awesome golf team, right? Whatever it is, right? I just dealt the other day, I was talking to a stepmother who called me and she said, my stepson wants to go to these schools. And these schools, as a guy who watches a lot of ESPN, these schools are all top 10 college football schools. And the point was, he could go to an in-state school that's pretty good at football, and save maybe $25,000 or $30,000 a year. And I just made the point that for $25,000 or $30,000 a year, you could send your kid to any college football game every single college football weekend, pay for the airline tickets, pay for the tickets, etc., and still probably come out ahead. So if I was in Kathleen and Becky's shoes, my point would be find the right fit first. And I don't know that the college football program needs to be at the top of that list. Doesn't mean it can't be a piece of it, but just understanding that and kind of balancing that with the financial impact and just having conversations, right? I mean, kids want to know more about their parents. They may not expressly say those things, but I think it's just a good opportunity to have these conversations and, maybe say, here's how I made the decision. Mom, dad, how'd you guys make these decisions, right? If they've got siblings, if they've got older friends, just getting into that and making smart adult decisions around this. And I think also prioritizing what's important. So depending where you are in this process, and I know we've got parents of different age kids here, but just understand that, if you're new to this process and maybe you've got a younger age child, good news, you've got time. Bad news, you've got time. And what I mean by that is college isn't getting any less expensive. And so just understanding, where you are in that process. I mean, if you've got a 6-year-old, again, to Kathleen's earlier point, you don't need to be focused on the college essay. I would even submit to you, you don't even need to understand fully the expected family contribution, because as I'll talk about in just a little bit, it's going to change between now and then. So just understanding that as you go through the process. Understanding also what's called the cost of attendance. Okay. Cost of attendance is your cost all in. So you can see the numbers there. I won't dive into those too much, but just understanding that for public schools, about $28,000 a year. For out of states, it's about double that. Private schools, a little bit more than that. For the elites and the Ivy League schools, $80,000 on up, right? And that's the sticker price. And again, that's all in. So that's tuition, room and board, books, computers, supplies, etc. So how do you get your hands on that money? Well, the first step is what's called the FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Every single college and university requires the FAFSA. There are a few, specifically 179, that also require a form called the CSS profile. Now, CSS profile just dives a little bit deeper, right? They may ask some more detailed questions. Things that the FAFSA doesn't ask about, like in the situation of a divorce, the CSS profile may ask about the non-custodial parent. They may ask about home equity, retirement plan assets, etc. So things that don't necessarily show up on the FAFSA. Additionally, some schools have their own institutional forms. So what's that mean to you? Is if it's the FAFSA, it's very, very black and white. If it's the CSS profile, it's a little bit more of a black box. But you want to understand what questions they ask and what they're looking at and how they use that information. Some schools, by the way, are more transparent about that than others. What you're determining in that process is what's called the cost of attendance. Okay, or sorry, what you're determining is what's called your expected family contribution. First number is cost of attendance, which I just talked about, your cost all in, minus your expected family contribution, the amount that the colleges and universities anticipate that you should be able to pay on an annual basis. The gap is your family's financial need. Financial need is the amount of aid for which your family is eligible. Doesn't mean that that's what you're going to get. It's just the amount for which you are eligible. It's also important to understand that some things count and some things don't count. So I won't read all of these to you, but on the left-hand side, those are things that count. On the right-hand side are things that generally don't count. Okay. Now, the one that always jumps out to people is the one at the bottom of that accessible list. So if you're putting $5 or $10 or $15 or $20,000 a year into your retirement plans, it comes back into the equation. Don't shoot the messenger. Okay. The way they look at it is they say, you don't have to save for retirement. You do need to pay for your child's college education. Now, the good news is that at most schools, money that you have inside of your retirement plans doesn't count. So if you've got $1 million inside of a 401k, it doesn't count. The $10,000 or $20,000 a year that you are deferring, not including an employer match or anything like that, but what you defer comes back in and it would count in the equation. So here's just a quick back of the napkin math to show really what they're looking at. The biggest drivers in this formula are the parents' adjusted gross income. You can kind of see that there in the blue on the left-hand side, as well as the assessable assets, which is across the top in gold. So just as an example here, we took a family that's got $150,000 of income and $200,000 of assets. And based on the current formula, their expected family contribution is $43,693. That's the amount that the colleges and universities would expect this family to pay on an annual basis. And you complete that FAFSA every year for which you want to be considered for need-based aid. Now, what I'd encourage you to do is, if you don't want to do, if you can look at this and say, okay, we're kind of right there, and you kind of have a sense of that, that's great. If you're a little bit closer to college, what you may want to do is go onto our website. The URL is down there at the bottom again, and you can access this. It's totally free. We have something called the College Money Report right there on the front page of our website. In the gold box, it's a totally free report. It'll give you, you can choose up to 3 colleges, and it'll give you a report on what the cost of attendance is, all kinds of good data about the school, and it'll also provide you with what is your expected family contribution. And it's going to give you 3 different versions. It's going to give you what's called the federal version, the institutional version, that's the CSS profile, and it'll also give you what's called the consensus EFC, which is, there's a specific group of schools that uses that formula. You can also access it here under the Get Help tab, and we've got a number of calculators there that you can utilize to access the information as well. But as was described earlier, a lot of this is changing, okay? And I put in there, we think it's changing, because the can has been kicked down the line a couple of times. However, there are a few major changes that are coming down the line. Number one, the EFC is being replaced by something called the Student Aid Index. Don't worry about the real differentials, other than just to know what used to be called the EFC is now going to be called the SAI, or the Student Aid Index. Good news, what was 108 questions is going to be 36. Here's the one that jumps out to people. Any of you who will have multiple kids in school simultaneously, right? And let's just say that you use that last number and your expected family contribution was roughly $44,000. Well, the way that it works right now is you take that $44,000 and you divide it by the number of kids in school simultaneously. When this passes, you will no longer divide that number by the number of students in school simultaneously. Instead, in that example, both kids' expected family contribution would be $44,000. So that's a big red flag. There's a lot of pushback on that. That's a big reason why they've said we're going to delay this a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I would tell parents, keep doing what you're doing, keep saving as much money as possible. Maybe you're not putting all of it into a college specific bucket. Maybe you're doing something that gives you a little bit more flexibility. But some things to be aware of, some things to think about. The Parent Income Protection Allowance is actually increasing by 20%. The Dependent Student Income Protection Allowance increases by about 35%. They're changing some of the rules for divorce situations. Right now, there's a list of about 7 questions that you have to go through to determine who is my parent in a situation of divorce. They're actually making it easier. Who provides more financial support for the child in the prior tax year? So if you've got a senior right now, they're looking at, in 2021, which parent provided more financial support. If it's truly 50-50, they say which parent had the greater adjusted gross income. Just understand, as I'm saying that, if you're a divorce situation, there might be some strategies there that make some sense to explore, right? If you're not divorced, I'm not encouraging you to get divorced, just so we're really clear, right? It's Valentine's month. I'm Cupid over here, right? I want everybody to stay married. But if you are divorced, it's a different set of strategies, okay? So just understand how that works, and understand, you kind of play the cards you're dealt. You figure out the strategies that make the most sense moving forward.
So Brock, having met both George and I, you think we should still stay together, huh?
Well, I don't want to opine about, present company. So, I'll let you guys. Big holiday coming up in a few days, George. 6 days.
Yeah,
You better be ready,
it.
buddy.
Get
I
on
miss
it.
it every year.
All right. I'll send some flowers to your house next week. It'll be great. I'm not going to dive into these because these are all sort of minor things, but just understand, and again, we'll get a copy of the slides out to people, that type of thing. Just understand that there are some changes coming down the pike. If you've got a senior, or if your kid will be in college in the next 3 or 4 years, it's just important to understand the nuances here and how it might impact you and that type of thing. So I'll pause there and just say, our hope is that the conversation continues. I've got a couple more things that I want to go through, but I also want to encourage you that today is really just the start, right? We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, kind of gave you a high level overview. If you want more information, if you'd like to engage with us, there's really 3 ways that you can do that. Number 1 is we've got what we call our free mini vault. I'm going to talk about that more here in just a second. We also offer free personalized consultations. So just like the college coaches do, if you'd like to sit down with one of the members of our team and sort of bring it from this 30,000 foot overview a little bit closer to ground level and look at your situation, we offer a free consultation. We'll do that. We'll help you understand sort of your situation and then figure out if it makes sense to engage further, and if so, what that might look like from more of a financial planning conversation, right? And I would tell you too, most of the clients who come to us have some type of an existing financial advisory relationship. If that's a great situation and you've got things that are going really well, we're not looking to replace it. But if we can add value and maybe educate you on some things and help you understand some strategies, that's what we want to be able to do as well. And then the third thing is we've got I'm biased, but I think a really great Facebook group. Again, totally free. If you're on Facebook, go under groups and search for Little Known Secrets of Paying for College. And what you'll see is we've got just shy of 10,000 members there. And what that is an opportunity, rather than this monologue of me sort of talking at you, it's a conversation. It allows you to be able to ask questions. And in addition to the advisors on the College Funding Coach team, we also have great counselors like Kathleen, like Becky, who are there. We've got national experts like Mark Kantrowitz, Ron Lieber, Jeff Salingo, some others who are in there who are just really, really altruistic with their time. They're certainly not there every day, but they add their feedback where they can. And I think it's a really good opportunity for you to ask questions and get lots of feedback. By the way, it's Facebook. Some of it's accurate, some of it's not, some of it's good, some of it's bad, but it's a conversation, right? And it allows you to ask some questions and get some good feedback there as well. And it looks like Bernie just put the link in the chat as well. Thanks, Bernie. That mini vault that will also get you access to, you'll have copies of the slides. You've got our 6-step family action plan workbook, which allows you to understand kind of that cost of attendance and EFC conversation. You've got an on-demand recording of our live presentation. In addition, at least once a month, usually 2 or 3 times, we do some sort of a specialty webinar. We might talk about student loans or scholarships or financial literacy. We're doing one next month, or maybe this month, about international colleges and how to maybe think about those as options. There's a load of free calculators in addition to that college money report that I mentioned. So check that out. We'll get access to everybody who's on tonight's webinar as well. So what's next? And then we'll wrap up and we'll give some time for some more Q&A. What can you do today to begin navigating the best way to do this? And I would tell you, I agree 100% with what Kathleen said about, if you've got a freshman or younger, it's not about choosing the right school. It's not about their extracurricular activities quite so much, right? But it's a heck of a good time for you to start thinking about how you're going to create a strategy for saving and paying for college. So some things to think about. What do colleges think you can afford? What can you actually afford? How do you find schools that are going to be generous for your child, either from a need-based and or a merit-based perspective? Understand what your out-of-pocket costs might be, and then how do you close the gap? How do you create a timeline for actually how to pay for college or to have multiple options that may work for your situation? And really, we're looking at 4 different scenarios here, sort of the high merit, low need, high merit, high need, low merit, high need, and low merit, low need. Here's the reality, folks. It doesn't matter which of those quadrants you find yourself in, but they're very different strategies for how you solve the problem associated with saving, planning, and paying for college. And the tool that we use for that is what's called the College Money Report that I mentioned. There's the free version that's on our website. I would tell you, access it. It's totally free. It's sort of the light version relative to what our advisors have access to. And so you can see here, it walks through a number of different things, helps you calculate all 3 of those numbers, which you see there with the blue dots, and then looks at up to 3 schools. We have the ability to look at many more schools. We also can tell you what the institutional scholarships are at each school, maybe help you identify some schools that may be off your beaten path. I tell you what, we had a family that we worked with a couple of weeks ago. University of Alabama was their son's #1 choice. There seems to be a football trend here with families that we work with. I don't know why, but University of Alabama was #1. We were able to tell that family that if their son just got 10 points more on the SAT, that they would actually be eligible for a $4,000 per year scholarship at the University of Alabama. Now, at some level, it doesn't matter to me what school the child ends up at, right? We want them to go to a great school that's a great fit and that mom and dad don't have to break the bank on. But I said, look, would it be worth it to maybe pay for a standardized test prep class, right? An SAT prep class to go try to eke out another 10 points for a $16,000 scholarship, right? It makes all the sense in the world. And so doesn't matter if it's University of Alabama or not, but that's the type of stuff that this software can really help a family uncover that I think is really valuable stuff. And then it dives in a little bit further, shows a family how they might actually pay for school, what the costs would be, et cetera, what the expected family contribution, cost of attendance, et cetera. So what I would ask of you, if you'd like more information, right? And or if you'd like to meet with one of our advisors, if you just want to pull out your phone or your iPad or mobile device, point the camera at that QR code and it'll take you through a form. You can sign up. The other thing too, she's behind the scenes right now, but there is what Bernadette Boyle actually looks like. That picture may be a couple of years old, but you can schedule the free consultation. You can call Bernie directly. She'll help you get scheduled with one of the advisors on our team. And I would tell you, Bernie may not be able to answer all of your financial planning or financial aid related questions, but she's got 2 things going for her, among other things. She's been with the College Funding Coach as of this week for 10 years. And she's got one daughter who's in college, another daughter who's on the way to college. So she's been through this process and she's sort of right there where a lot of you are. And I think understands both the pain points and maybe some of the opportunities that exist. So with that, I will wrap up. I would just say, Kathleen, George, Becky, really, really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you. I know we're a little bit over time, but if we've got some questions, I think we'd love to dive in on those. Please feel free to, if you need to go, we get it. Please give us your feedback. If you'd like to reach out to us, please let us know. Bernie, maybe you can even put the schedule a consultation information and or your contact information. That way, if somebody didn't get it when we flashed on the screen, that'd be great. If you do need to leave, we get it. If you want to stick around, I think I can twist my co-presenter's arms here and we'll stick around as long as we can get the questions answered. So
Sure.
I would mention something real quick, which is if we put a lot of great information in the chat. If you'd like to save the chat, you can save it to your computer just by, and I put this in the chat. Basically, you click on the 3 dots just to the right of the smiley face. So hopefully you can get it. And if you can't get it, you could email george@thecollegecoaches.com and I'll send it to you for $20.
I see I see John Gutierrez. Yes, Tom Henske was in fact. So check this out. This guy's claim to fame. So, okay, I'm going to show my cards here. So this is from when we did this. This is 100 things Virginia fans should know and do before they die. So Tom Henske was the UVA soccer goalie. They had a pretty prolific soccer team under a guy named Bruce Arena as the head coach back in the mid-90s. And Tom Henske won 3 national championships as the goalie. Just an all-around good dude. So John, I don't know if you know Tom, but that is his claim to fame. So.
And Brock, there looks like there's a question in the chat about student loans.
Let's see.
When does that make sense? I think was the question. Taking out student loans, when does that make sense?
Yeah, it's my answer, like it is for a lot of things, is it kind of depends. And that's where I would tell you, like this is where I would tell you, go have that consultation. And I say that not to evade the question, but like it depends on your situation. We had parents just a year and a half ago who had the money to pay for college. And a year and a half ago, student loan interest rates were a lot lower. And they said, hey, if I can borrow the money at 3 and I'm earning 7 or 8 on my money, maybe there's an arbitrage that exists there. And things have changed, right? The market has changed, interest rates have changed. And so I'm not suggesting that that makes sense. I would say if there's a gap in the amount that you have saved and the cost of attendance, it probably makes sense to take out student loans if you understand the impact of that. Because what I would say is, and one of the things too that we do through this College Aid Pro software is when you go and take out a mortgage, you have to be pre-qualified for that mortgage, right? They say, okay, like here's the cost of the house you're looking to buy. Here's what your assets are. Here's what you can qualify for. That doesn't exist with college. And so parents say, I really want my kid to go to school X, and I'm going to take out an exorbitant student loan without understanding fully the impact to the child and or the parents of that student loan. And so I would, and we've got calculators about this on the website. I would just encourage you to take a look at those and really make a smart and an informed decision about that that's right for your family. Okay. Something from Kathleen about sex, drugs, and the SAT.
Yeah, that book I co-authored.
Any highlights?
Well, I didn't write the sex and drugs part. I wrote the college part. My co-author was a dean of students at a high school, so she wrote all that jazz. And John, we just answered your question about the FAFSA. I apologize. Becky and I were conferring about it, and we answered it to ourselves, which doesn't really help you.
Sorry.
It is, no, it's all good. I just put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know. I see Jen Underwood's question here about the paying section. Where is the paying section? I don't see that as a header.
I know. I'm gonna find that for Brock.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so John, the answer on the FAFSA is required at the overwhelming majority of schools for merit scholarships. And the reason is they want to look and see, they want to make sure that you're not eligible for federal money essentially before giving you their money, institutional money. And so just like, I mean, maybe since we were just talking about college soccer, you know, if you think about it, before you get an athletic scholarship, you have to have filled out the FAFSA because they don't want to give you the institutional money if you might be eligible for federal money, as an example. And so, you know, whether your kid can dunk a basketball, play the cello, or speak 7 languages fluently, fill out the FAFSA. And I would always tell you, I mean, just strong advice. I would absolutely, positively fill out the FAFSA their senior year, so the year before their freshman year, regardless of whether or not you think you'll get money. Because depending on the schools, you may get merit money. I mean, I just the success stories we've had of family, you know, like mom or dad on a weekend just knocked out the FAFSA, and then they come back, here's where the kid ended up in school, and we got a $10,000 scholarship. Wouldn't have gotten that scholarship had we not filled out the FAFSA. I was going to say hundreds, at least dozens of stories like that. So, you know, once the dust settles and you figure out where they're in school and what the cost is going to be, maybe in years 2, 3, and 4, you're not filling out the FAFSA. But I would absolutely tell you in the senior year of high school and for every year thereafter that you want to be considered, fill out the FAFSA. If something changes with your financial situation, fill out the FAFSA, and maybe don't even wait until the FAFSA comes around, right? Maybe it makes sense to go talk to the financial aid office sooner rather than later if your situation changes dramatically. So just things to sort of chew on there as you go through that process. George put some great links there about the college coaches.
Brock,
Yep.
do you see the question from Asia?
Yeah, if student is submitting an application in fall of 2023, then which year of retirement saving contribution? Yeah, so it's the prior year. So in other words, they would. It sounds like Aisha, that your student would matriculate in. You say submitting the application, so I'm assuming that they're going to actually matriculate like in September of 2024. So you would be using your income taxes and all of that information from 2022. So good news, bad news. Can't do anything about it because it would be last year. But just figure out whatever the year is that they're matriculating, they're starting school, and back up 2 years. That's the year that they're looking at as what's called the base year for purposes of financial aid. Does the EFC take into account the number of kids one has? The answer is yes. And you can look, if you really want to nerd out on this stuff, do a quick Google search, EFC formula 2023. What you'll find is like a 26, 29 page document from the Department of Education that'll walk you through the entire formula, and you can see the algorithm for how they count the number of kids in school simultaneously. Again, that is supposed to be changing when we get to 2024 as well. But that formula, the allowance that they give you is based on the number in the family. So therefore the number of kids. Let's see. Got all that. John says increase by 20. No, I think you're talking about the income protection allowance, John. And so it is increased by 20%. So again, if you go look at that same document I just mentioned, you can take those numbers and roughly increase them by 20%. Yeah, and I think, Magnus, we answered your question about student loans. Look, I can make an argument for or against. I would just say it really depends on the specifics of your situation. And I would say take a lot of time to really understand the impact, the financial impact of taking out those loans, right? I would go back to, I think Becky said it, it's, where you go is not who you'll be, right? And that's the title of a book. But like,
Right.
I would just say, like, don't stretch yourself so much financially. I just talked to a parent today. Her daughter is going to a very expensive, very prestigious school, but it's expensive. And this particular school isn't giving a lot of need-based aid. They're not giving any merit-based aid because I looked at the numbers. This is one of these schools where they get 50,000 applications a year. If your kid doesn't come there, the next kid will. And there's some supply and demand to that. So I think, again, going back to the fit and understanding where you're a good fit, you can still have an excellent future, even if your kid doesn't go to the most prestigious or most expensive school out there, right? Doesn't mean that those really expensive schools aren't also a good fit for some families. It just may not be a fit for your family if it's going to stretch you really thin or force you to make sacrifices in other areas, I would say.
Can I add one other thing to that,
Please.
to Brock? I think when you're talking about the college and the fit, that of course that's very important. The other thing to think about if you want to take out student loans is what kind of major is the student going into? What do the job prospects look like in terms of salaries and things like that? And there are definitely websites where you can check out that information too, like projecting out how much an engineer might get paid, or someone who is in accounting and that kind of thing, to see how much you would end up owing and how much that would be like per month if you take out student loans.
Yeah, and I see here, John, I see your comment. Claudio's son had an eventful World Cup, so it'll be interesting to see how things develop for him. But so another good question, John. Can you do? And I'll leave some of the I'll leave the names out to protect the perhaps, but probably not innocent names that you mentioned. But can you do any tricks? And I just, again, I had a mother today who asked me that question, and I said, look, you can, just like you can lie on your taxes, right? Like, it's not impossible to lie on your taxes, but you might get caught. And if you get caught, the penalties are pretty severe. Right? Like, you might never be eligible for federal financial aid. You could actually go to prison. I would just tell you it's probably not worth it, right? So there are tricks, but probably not a good idea. The deadline for FAFSA, there is actually not a deadline. The FAFSA opens up October 1st of each year. And so you can start the FAFSA October 1st. It used to be January 1st, and I think it was ruining people's New Year's Eve plans. And so they changed it to October 1st, right? So that's a little bit better. And that's when they also changed it to, instead of being the prior year, it's the prior year. Because there were also all kinds of problems with people saying, well, I don't have my taxes done. It just makes it cleaner. Is it a perfect process? No. But it's October 1st. You can start filling it out. Pay attention to each university's deadlines. Each university has their own deadlines by which they want it, depending on if you're doing regular decision, early action, etc. Make sure you're paying attention to those deadlines if you want to be eligible for need-based aid. And also, I would say the sooner you do it accurately, the better, right? So it doesn't pay to defer or delay completing the FAFSA, right? Because once the money's gone, it's gone, right? Even if you're eligible for need-based aid, you want to get in line and get in line quickly. George, I don't know if you answered this. There was a question here about the saving the chat. I think that in the lower right-hand corner, there's a smiley face, and to the right of that, there's 3 dots. If you click on that, there's something that says save chat. And George says, I'll email you the chat. So even better. Let's see. Susanna says, does the FAFSA take into account living in an expensive area? It does. So Susanna, you sounds like you live in my area. Pay money in rent. Yeah, I get it. So the good news, bad news, right? I'll take Virginia and Maryland as an example. So I live in Arlington, Virginia. Kathleen and George, are you guys Bethesda, or where are you guys?
Bethesda, yeah.
Bethesda, yeah. So like these two areas are really, really high rent areas. And the way that the financial aid formula works is they go state by state. So in Virginia, they give you the same allowance whether you're in Arlington or you're in Bristow. In Maryland, they give you the same allowance whether you're in Bethesda or you're in Hagerstown. And so, again, don't shoot the messenger, but that's the way the formula works, right? It works a little bit better if you're in places like Connecticut or Rhode Island or, maybe some smaller states or where there's not so much disparity, but that's the way that the formula works. So there is a little bit of an accounting for being in an expensive area, but not really. I would also tell you, Susanna, like if there's extenuating circumstances, make sure you work with the financial aid office to express those. George put his email there, so if you're having trouble getting the chat, just send him a quick email, george@thecollegecoaches.com. Amy says, how much would one-time income items affect the FAFSA? Yeah, so Amy, great question. I just had this question in our Facebook group this week. We had a person there who sold a commercial building. So sale of a property, generally speaking, that's going to be a capital gain, but it's going to show up on your taxes. And so the answer is it would impact you, right? Because it's looking at your adjusted gross income. If that's your situation, I would encourage you to go reach out to the financial aid office and say, okay, here's our situation. You could probably even easily calculate it with and without that extenuating circumstance and explain to the financial aid officer, here's the issue, right? Now, I would tell you, if there's a way to avoid that and not have that show up on the prior year or any of the years while your children are going to be eligible for need-based aid, that's even more ideal. But that said, the equity in that property generally would count, so maybe it doesn't solve the problem. But these are the type of things we work through with families to say, okay, here's the specific solution for your situation and help you make an educated and informed decision around that. Oh, look, I'm just like behind the 8 ball here. George even put in the chat a link to the chat. George is behind the 8 ball too, because 3 more questions came in that haven't been there. Maybe if we're really lucky, he'll do it at the end and you can capture that. But let's see. Diana says, how does FAFSA affect the chance of getting high scholarships? Well, again, understand that scholarships are merit and or need-based aid, right? So there are scholarships that are totally need blind and scholarships that are need aware. And so it depends. The FAFSA could come into play. It could not come into play, right? So I'm working right now with a family. Last year, dad made over $3 million. Their son has a $25,000 college scholarship. It's a one-time deal, but it's $25,000 in his pocket. And so that is not a need-aware scholarship. So the point being, doesn't hurt to fill out the FAFSA. There are a lot of scholarships that are need-aware, and so it might help you, but it doesn't necessarily hurt you. I think Nia says, I would like a copy. So, George, I'm sure you're on top of that. And then Alexandria, I would like the chat emailed and have sent you an email. Perfect.
I think that's just about a wrap.
I think that's about a wrap. So, George, any final thoughts? I see Bernie putting a couple more links there as well. George, Kathleen, Becky, any other thoughts from your side?
Just want to thank you, Brock and Bernie, for
Yes.
being with us tonight, and thanks too to Becky, who did a webinar with us last Wednesday, a in-home presentation on Sunday,
Good.
and now again tonight. So appreciate
Oh,
that,
good.
spending your time with us, all of you, and you too, George.
Yes, thank you very
Must-
much.
Thank you
Must
all.
be college
Take care.
season, right? We're busy. So, yeah, appreciate
Yeah,
everybody being here.
exactly.
Sorry it ran long, but based on the kind words here, hopefully it was time well spent. So if we can be a resource for you, our organizations are independent, but obviously in some ways attached to the hip because we're solving the same type of problems simultaneously.